Well, Sig put this out yesterday, which caused me to look deeper into what's going on. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to talk. A firearm that's supposed to be the backbone of our military's sidearm program has been at the center of controversy, and I've been covering these stories for years now, and they're not going away, and I actually have some reports from the military to show you some stuff too. Soldiers, police officers, and civilians have all reported that their Sig Sauer P320 pistols are firing without anybody pulling the trigger. You've heard this story before. Well, like I said yesterday, Sig finally decided to address this issue with this post on their X account. Says the truth about the P320. The P320 cannot, under any circumstance, discharge without a trigger pull. That is a fact. The allegations against the P320 are nothing more than individuals seeking to profit or avoid personal responsibility. Recently, anti-gun groups, members of the mainstream media, trial attorneys, and other uninformed and agenda-driven parties have launched attacks on one of Sig Sauer's most trusted, most tested, and most popular products, the P320 pistol. In all cases, these individuals have an ulterior motive behind their baseless allegations that the 320 can fire without a trigger pull. They have no evidence, no data, and no empirical testing to support any of their claims. They instead choose to misrepresent clear, negligent discharges as a design problem. In the decades since its introduction, the P320 has undergone the most rigorous testing and evaluation of any firearm by military and law enforcement agencies around the world. It consistently delivers a proven record of performance and reliability through state-of-the-art engineering and documented quality control at every stage of its production. Claims that unintended discharges are anything more than negligent handling and or manufactured lies to support an anti-gun, anti-SIG agenda are false. Furthermore, lawsuits claiming that the P320 is capable of firing without the trigger being pulled have been dismissed in courtrooms around the country. In addition, multiple plaintiffs, so-called experts, have conceded it is not possible for the P320 to discharge unless the trigger is fully actuated. The rhetoric is high, and we can no longer stand silent while lawsuits run their course. And clickbait farming, engagement hacking grifters continue to campaign to hijack the truth for profit. Enough is enough. From the courts of law to the court of public opinion, we will combat the lies and misinformation with the truth. Sig Sauer stands behind the quality, safety, and design of all our products, especially the P320. Industry, take notice. What's happening today to Sig Sauer with the anti-gun mob and their lawfare tactics will happen tomorrow to another firearms manufacturer, and then another. Today, for Sig Sauer, it ends. Wow, that's a fiery post. Calling people out. I guess they felt like they were backed into a corner. I've had many conversations with people at SIG in New Hampshire when I've been there a few times about these lawsuits, and every single time I talked to anybody, it was always said that it was, user error. Now, immediately after them posting this post on X, there were, as you can imagine, hundreds of people posting in defense of SIG saying that they have had a ton of rounds through their P320s with zero issues. Myself, I have 5 versions of the 320 in my safe, and I've never had a problem either. Well, most of the time they're sitting in the safe. Now, I did see 1 or 2 posts where folks said that they did have issues with their P320 and it discharged on their own. But you have to say, those folks had rounds through their gun with no issues as well until there was an issue. Sounds crazy, right? Well, that's smoke. And where there's smoke, there's usually fire. Buckle up, because we're taking a deep dive into the alarming reports, lawsuits, and evidence that suggests there's more to the story than maybe SIG wants people to believe. Now, I am staying in the middle on this. I have no information that says SIG's lying. I have no information that says the people who are suing them are lying. I just want you to know what's out there. Welcome back to Guns and Gadgets, the premier source for Second Amendment news. If you're here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button. Turn on the notifications so you never miss an update on your rights, your gear, and what's happening in the world of firearms. A big shout out to the sponsor, Blackout Coffee. If you love freedom and you love a damn good cup of coffee, support a company that stands with us. Check out blackoutcoffee.com/G&G, and let's get into this here. The Sig Sauer P320, many of you know, It's a civilian version of the Army's M17 and M18 pistols. Rather, it should be flipped because it was a civilian version first that was adapted to become the M17 and M18. It's a striker-fired modular handgun that won a $580 million contract to replace the Beretta M9 in the US military. But what if I told you that soldiers have been getting shot by their own issued sidearms? Not in combat, not in a firefight, but right in their offices, their guard booths, and training exercises. The worst part, some of them claim that they never even touched the trigger. I will say that training errors do happen. Again, I'm just giving you information. I am not leaning one way or another. But let's go to Fort Eustis on this one, in Virginia, on February 8th, 2023, where a military police officer suffered an injury to his foot when his M17 handgun inadvertently discharged after it made contact with another officer's holstered firearm. Here's their narrative from the incident report. On February 8th of 2023, at approximately 13:05 hours, service member 1, an Army soldier, injured police officer, was in the supervisor's office conducting administrative duties at the Fort Eustis Provost Marshal's office in the second cubicle. His arms were leaning over the top of the cubicle while engaging in conversation with his coworkers. Witness 1, who's also a police officer and an Air Force civilian, was immediately sitting next to SM1 completing a police report in the computer. The first cubicle was occupied by Witness 2 and Officer 1, who is an Air Force civilian police officer, and both officers were conducting administrative work and preparing to eat lunch. The third cubicle was unoccupied. Officer 1 stood up to grab his food out of the office refrigerator, which is at the far end of the room. As Officer 1 walked through a narrow space and attempted to pass SM1, Officer 1's holster made contact with SM1's holster, causing a round to inadvertently discharge from SM1's firearm and striking him on the top of his right foot where it meets his ankle. Officer 1 recognized the round was discharged and immediately proceeded to evaluate SM1 and provided initial medical care until Fort Eustis Fire EMS arrived at the scene. Officer 1 removed SM1's holster and placed it on the ground and away. The Fort Eustis EMS transported SM1 to the emergency room while Officer 1 and SM2, who's a master sergeant in the Army, took the weapon to the clearing barrel to ensure the weapon was properly cleared. As they cleared the weapon, they discovered the expended shell casing had not exited the slide and or the ejection port. SM2 and Officer 1 proceeded to document and process the weapon as evidence. So in that one, two guys go to squeeze past each other in a narrow hallway, their holsters bump against each other, and then bang, a round rips through his foot, requiring surgery and 6 months of rehab. Now, the sergeant's own gun, his P320, fired without him ever pulling the trigger. He later told investigators, and I quote, "I don't feel safe around those weapons anymore." There's a couple more I want to show you too. Approximately at 03:27 hours on May 1st, 2023, a command OOD was escorting armory custodians with the armory keys to open the armory for a rifle range. Prior to entering the armory compound, the OOD stopped at the clearing barrel in order to clear their M18. OOD pulled the pistol out of the holster with their right hand and placed the barrel of the gun in the clearing barrel. OOD ensured the weapon was on safe and removed the magazine with their left hand. Once the magazine was removed, OOD placed their left hand on the slide, and prior to pulling the slide to the rear, a round discharged from the M18 into the clearing barrel. OOD is sure that they never touched the trigger of the M18, no personnel were harmed or equipment damaged. And you can see here in the primary findings, based on the events of this investigation, it was determined responsible personnel mishandled the M18 service pistol, leading to a negligent discharge in the clearing barrel. And I put that on there because I don't want everybody to think I'm just here leaning against SIG. Like I said, that safe has probably $10,000 worth of SIG products in it. So I like SIG. But where there's smoke, there's fire. Here's another one. This one took place at Camp Foster in Okinawa, Japan. On 14 February of 23, approximately 10 o'clock, a negligent discharge occurred at entry gate 1 on Camp Foster in Okinawa. While standing post at gate 1, person 1, a Japanese security guard, was standing at ID checkpoint facing toward the roadway. P1 had just rested their right hand lightly on the rotating cover of the weapon holster, fingers at the bottom of the holster. The weapon discharged, damaging the holster by the round, leaving a hole in the end and cracking along the side, also breaking the rotating cover. That's people just leaning their hand on their holster just about everybody does it at some point. Well, when that happened, the gun went bang. The round put a hole in the right side of the trouser cargo pocket of P1 before impacting the ground. The background: P1 arrived for duty and attended the morning briefing for their assigned duties. P1 was assigned to Gate 1 with Person 2. At 04:45 hours, P1 met with Person 3 and went to the armory to receive the weapon, M18, and 2 magazines with 17 rounds each. After receiving the weapon and ammunition, P1 placed the weapon in Condition 1 by inserting 1 magazine in the weapon and chambered 1 round. He placed the weapon on safe, holstered the weapon, and put the rotating cover in position. P3 observed the entire process of P1 receiving the weapon and through the stages to have the weapon in Condition 1. P3 drove P1 and P2 to Gate 1, arriving at 0510. P1 and P2 opened up the guard shack while P3 opened the gate. P1 and P2 rotated standing at the ID checkpoint throughout the morning until P1's weapon discharged at 10 o'clock while standing at the ID checkpoint. Statement of P2. P2 was working with P1 on 14th of February 23. P2 was in the guard shack when P2 heard a loud noise. P2 went out to see what made the loud noise when P2 noticed P1 was shaking and nervous. P2 asked what happened. P1 told P2 the weapon discharged. P2 checked to see that P1 was okay, visually checked with P1 that the weapon was on safe, and then returned to the guard shack to call the duty desk to report the incident. Statement of P3. P3 was with P1 to supervise the issuing of the weapon, 2 magazines and 34 rounds, 17 per magazine. P1 put 1 magazine in its pouch and at the safety barrel inserted 1 magazine in the weapon and chambered 1 round while placing the weapon on safe. P1 then inserted the weapon in the holster and put the rotating cover in the safe position to secure the weapon in the holster. P3 stated that this is the standard procedure. Let's jump down to the investigation conclusions. After reviewing the security camera footage, the mishap investigator concluded that P1 did not mishandle the weapon at any time while on duty at Gate 1 prior to the weapon discharging. From the evidence and statements from the persons involved, it is apparent that the weapon fired while on safe and secured in the holster. Maintenance was conducted per technical manual, blah-bitty, blah-bitty, blah, blah-bitty, blah-bitty, blah. So as you guys can see, it's not one just freak accident. Military records obtained through a Freedom of Information Act request show at least 9 incidents between 2020 and 2023, where Sig's P320 fired unintentionally, injuring soldiers in Missouri, Virginia, Louisiana, and even as far as Amman, Jordan. Now, some of these injuries were so severe that soldiers had to be evacuated for specialized medical treatment. Meanwhile, civilians and law enforcement officers have been suing Sig Sauer, claiming the same thing, that their P320s are discharging without trigger pulls. Now, I reported a little while ago that a federal jury in Georgia awarded $2.3 million to a gun owner who was shot in the leg by his own P320 while it was still holstered. His attorney, Bob Zimmerman, said that it isn't an isolated problem. It's happening time and time again. So what does Sig Sauer have to say about all this? Well, they deny it, kind of. The company says that the P320 is safe and has passed rigorous military testing. And I believe them of that. But there is an issue, and my opinion is it appears as there could be an issue because you don't see this, at least I don't see in the media another model firearm having this issue. So and this is just my opinion. What do you guys think? I mean, Sig points out that, and rightfully so, that they've won 13 legal cases where judges or juries found no liability on their part. And they claim that the gun simply won't fire unless the trigger is pulled. But let's be real here. How do you explain surveillance footage from Okinawa, Japan, showing the Marines 320 going off while the safety was still engaged? How do you explain witness reports of guns firing with hands nowhere near the trigger? There's videos of them going off in the holster of cops, in their vehicle, or, trying to control an arrestee. And here's where things get even sketchier. The Army initially claimed that they worked with Sig Sauer to investigate these incidents, but then they backtracked saying, wait, Sig wasn't actually involved in any of our investigations. So what was it? And what is it? Were they investigating these so-called accidents with Sig Sauer, or were they just, they don't want to get involved now? I don't know what it is. But let's take a step back here. The 320 hit the market in 2014, and Sig sold over 2.5 million of them. And there's so many versions of the model, I don't know how many they've sold, because Sig does a really good job at selling firearms. The next version always makes you want it because it's better than the one you bought. I've fallen victim. Like I said, I got 5 versions of it. But concerns about the gun go back years. In 2017, early military testing found the 320 was prone to drop fires. And that's when everybody started talking about it on the YouTubes. That meant if you dropped it at certain angles, the gun would go off. Now, Sig made some changes by adding a new trigger mechanism, doing that voluntary upgrade for older models. But now, with all the reports of spontaneous discharges, we have to ask, is the problem really fixed? Is there really a problem? What is it? Will we ever know? Well, consider this. There are dozens of lawsuits that have been filed against Sig Sauer by civilians, law enforcement officers, and military personnel. The plaintiffs claim that the 320 has a design or a manufacturing defect that allows it to fire without a trigger pull. More than 100 people have come forward to make similar allegations about the 320, and Sig insists the gun is safe. Now, I do think that maybe if there was one or two legit issues, other people are coming forward to try to get some of that cash too. There have been two major legal defeats for Sig Sauer recently. Now, I've already discussed that case from 2024, where a federal jury in Georgia awarded Robert Lang $2.3 million in damages. Now, in that situation, he was removing the 320 from the holster without even touching the trigger, and that's what he claims, and it discharged. In November of 24, after a three-week trial, a Philadelphia jury awarded $11 million to a man whose holstered Sig Sauer pistol went off on its own while he was going down the stairs, causing a serious leg injury. And that attorney is representing more people with more lawsuits. Now, earlier settlements also happened. In 2018 and 2019, Sig settled out of court with two law enforcement officers whose department-issued 320s allegedly discharged unintentionally, causing injuries. Now, Sig Sauer maintains that the 320 is safe and claims the gun will not fire unless the trigger is pulled. Now, the company states that it has prevailed, like I said, in 13 legal cases where courts have found insufficient evidence to hold them liable for injuries. But we do have two so far that says that they were found liable. Now, the company did modify, like I said, the 320 in response to early reports of drop fire concerns, but it continues to deny claims that the gun fires spontaneously. And despite multiple reports of unintentional discharges within the Army, Air Force, and Marine Corps, the military insists that the P320, which they call the M17 and M18, meets safety standards. The 320 remains in use by the U.S. military and many police departments around this country, and even the world. So there's a lot of people that trust the gun. There's a small percentage of issues popped up. We just really want to know if there's a problem or not. Now, the company's legal and public stance, again, is that the 320 is safe. But the growing lawsuits and settlements suggest controversy is just not going away. Bottom line, this isn't just a lawsuit here and there. It's the military, law enforcement, and civilians all reporting the same thing. 320 going off without warning. And yet, the Army insists there's no issue. Sig keeps fighting lawsuits, and again, say that the gun is safe. What do you think? Now, I already know people are already writing. I have had a 320 since they came out, and I got 450 bazillion rounds through it, no issues. Is it an issue with the 320 itself, or is there something else going on? What do you really think? I really want to hear from you. Drop a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Also, if you had any experiences, good or bad, with the Sig 320, share them in the comments. Let's get a conversation going. A huge thanks to Blackout Coffee for supporting the channel. If you love America, if you love the Second Amendment, you love high-quality coffee, check us out using the link down below in the description. If you haven't already, smash the subscribe button and hit the bell notification as well. I bring you the facts, the truth, and the news that the mainstream media won't cover. Stay armed, stay safe, stay prepared, and as always, carry a gun, man. Be safe, stay vigilant, carry a gun, because you're going to need to protect yourself before a cop could ever get there. I'll see you on the next one, y'all. Take care.